3 months after my affair with my boss was exposed, my husband confronted me in the most painful way possible. I never imagined our marriage would end like this. 3 months ago, my whole world fell apart. My relationship with Greg, my boss, had gone from whispered rumors in the office to a full-blown scandal. But nothing could have prepared me for the agony of watching Jason, my husband, learn the truth. Jason had always been the symbol of kindness, support and trust, and I had shattered that trust in the most unforgivable way. Back then, it felt like I was just going through the motions of life. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I justified it with excuses. I convinced myself that I deserved the attention and excitement that Greg brought into my life. Jason and I have been married for 6 years. Our relationship had started with so much passion, but over time it seemed like the spark had faded. Jason became absorbed in his career, and I often felt invisible. I craved the kind of validation and connection that Greg eagerly offered. It all began innocently, with late nights at the office and casual chats in the break room. Greg was magnetic, confident, and attentive, qualities Jason no longer showed me. He listened to my frustrations, laughed at my jokes, and made me feel noticed. His attention was intoxicating, like a breath of fresh air in a stagnant room. Soon our conversation shifted from work-related topics to personal matters. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we had crossed every boundary. The physical side of our affair was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Greg was passionate, making me feel desired, a feeling I hadn't felt from Jason in years. But no matter how exciting it was, I knew it didn't make it right. I was betraying my husband, the man who had always been there for me, the man who loved me unconditionally. Deep down, I knew I was making a huge mistake. But in the moment, I convinced myself it was just a short fling, something insignificant, yet I couldn't ignore the truth. I had trapped myself in a mess of my own making, and it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. That fateful Monday arrived. Jason had taken a day off from work, but I had a meeting with Greg. We had planned to meet at a nearby hotel, a routine we had fallen into. I never imagined what would happen next. As I sat in a hotel room with Greg, the sound of the door slamming open broke the silence. My heart dropped. Jason's voice, trembling with anger and disbelief, echoed through the room. "What the hell is this, Karen?" he shouted. I froze. Greg sat across from me, his face pale, shocked and unsure how to react. Jason stood in the doorway, his usual calm replaced by raw fury. His face was red, his eyes burning with betrayal. "Jason," I stammered, barely able to speak. How could I explain this? How could I justify breaking the life we had built together? "You're really doing this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Is this what you've been doing behind my back? Sleeping with him, my own wife? With my boss?" I stood, but Greg quickly pushed past me, escaping the room without saying a word. I couldn't bring myself to move. I watched helplessly as the man I had risked everything for vanished, leaving me alone to face the wreckage I had caused. Jason's eyes no longer held any warmth. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, his voice steady yet filled with pain. Broke the silence. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said. "How could you do this to me, Karen, after everything we've been through?" I had no response. There were no excuses left to give, no words that could undo the damage I caused. I had destroyed everything. I betrayed Jason in the most unforgivable way, and there was no way to take back what had already happened. That night, Jason left. I stayed in the hotel room for hours, consumed by the enormity of what had just occurred. The weight of my decisions pressed heavily on me. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a destruction of the life we had built together. And now was over in the weeks that followed. Jason and I barely spoke. I desperately tried to apologize. But he refused to listen. He moved out of our home, finding shelter with a friend, while I was left alone to face the aftermath of my actions. The affair didn't just break our marriage. It began to unravel every part of my life. At work, whispers spread like wildfire. I became the subject of office gossip, the woman who let her personal mistakes ruin her career. The judgment was relentless, but nothing compared to the pain of losing Jason. I could see how much he was suffering, and knowing that I was a cause was unbearable. I missed him deeply, but I also understood why he needed space. He was trying to process the unimaginable, and I couldn't blame him for pulling away. 3 months passed, and there was no sign of reconciliation. We exchanged occasional texts or emails, but his words were brief, and his anger was still present. The wounds I had caused were far from healed. Then one evening he called and asked to meet. My heart raced as I clung to hope that this could be the start of mending the damage I had done. We met at a quiet cafe the moment I saw him. I knew he had changed. He looked drained, worn down by the weight of everything that had happened. I wanted to reach out to comfort him, but I knew that wasn't why he had come. He needed answers. He needed closure. You've had plenty of time, Karen. He began, his tone cold and firm. I've tried to be patient, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine. The trust is gone. You've broken me. And I don't even know if I can put myself back together. His words cut through me. My voice trembled as I replied. I know I've hurt you, Jason. I can't undo what I've done. I was lost and I made the worst decision of my life. I never wanted to hurt you. He looked at me with a mix of heartbreak and anger. You hurt me the moment you started lying. He said the moment you chose to betray me with him. The tension between us was unbearable, filling every corner of the cafe. Then without warning, Jason stood and slapped me. The sound of the slap echoed to the room, leaving me stunned. My cheek burned and tears welled up in my eyes. I looked at him, hoping for some sign of regret. But there was none. His face was twisted in pain. But he showed no remorse. I don't think I can ever forgive you. He said, his voice raw with emotion. And I don't even know if I want to try. Without saying another word, he turned and walked out, leaving me paralyzed by the weight of my regrets. That moment was a breaking point. The physical pain was brief, but the emotional wound was devastating. Jason had reached his limit. He could no longer pretend or hope for things to go back to the way they were. In that instant, I knew our marriage was truly over. Life moved on, but not in the way I had hoped. Jason eventually found someone new, while I tried to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The affair, it cost me dearly. My marriage, my dignity, and my career, it taught me a painful truth. Some mistakes have consequences that can't be undone. Every day I live with the reality of my actions. Betrayal leaves deep scars and sometimes no apology. No matter how sincere, can heal the damage.